They say the truth reveals itself in silence, but what they don't tell you is that silence isn't just quiet. It's a mirror, a scalpel, a storm. Carl Jung understood something that most people spend a lifetime denying, that relationships are not tested in comfort but in absence. So if you want to know someone's true nature, don't argue with them, don't confront them, don't even explain. Just walk away. Leave. Withdraw your presence, your energy, your validation. What follows will be the truth, unfiltered. The people who genuinely care will come closer, even if they don't understand why you left. They'll reach out, not to pull you back into their control, but to meet you in the space you've created. But those who depended on you for ego strokes, for power, for their own convenience, they will show you their real face. They'll rage, they'll guilt trip, they'll play the victim, because your absence robs them of control. Jung believed that the unconscious motives behind human behavior are often masked until a crisis reveals them. And walking away, especially when done quietly, is a crisis for the manipulator, the narcissist, the fake friend. You've disrupted the script. You've broken the emotional contract they never said out loud but always expected you to follow. Stay, serve, don't question. So when you walk, watch carefully. Do they reach out with concern or with blame? Do they try to understand or do they immediately accuse? Do they mourn your absence or do they punish you for it? This is the test Jung pointed to, the individuation process. The moment you assert your own path, you'll lose the false relationships that depended on your self-abandonment. And though it hurts, that's exactly what must happen. Because when you finally walk away, not in anger but in truth, you give others the chance to show you who they've been all along. Most won't thank you. Some will call you selfish. But if you stay still long enough, if you resist the urge to return just to feel needed again, you'll see it clearly. Their reaction is their confession. Their silence is their answer. Their anger is their exposure. And your distance? That was never the betrayal, it was the revelation. When you decide to walk away, you are not just stepping back physically, you are disrupting the emotional ecosystem that kept false narratives alive. Carl Jung taught us that every person wears masks, roles carved by social expectations, survival needs, and deep unconscious patterns. These masks protect vulnerable parts of the self, but also deceive others about who we truly are. In relationships built on convenience, neediness, or control, these masks can become prison bars. Walking away is the moment when those masks start to crumble because they rely on your presence to hold the illusion intact. When you leave, suddenly there is no audience, no validation, and no script to follow. The narcissist who relied on your constant approval to feel powerful becomes exposed, their mask slipping into rage or desperation. The fake friend, who only showed up when it benefited them, disappears completely or turns their back. Jung described the process of individuation as the path of becoming who you really are by shedding illusions. Walking away forces others into that process too, but many refuse to face it. Instead, they react defensively, trying to reclaim control or rewrite the story to paint you as the villain. The mask falls off in these moments of tension. What remains is raw personality, often ugly or vulnerable, but real. This is why walking away feels like betrayal to some. They cannot tolerate the loss of illusion, and they cannot accept the truth that your absence reveals. It also shows you the invisible chains that kept you bound in the relationship. Chains of obligation, fear, guilt, and the desperate hope that others would change if only you stayed longer. Jung emphasized the importance of breaking these chains for true psychological freedom. By walking away, you are not abandoning others. You are reclaiming your soul from their unconscious demands. You give yourself the space to heal and grow without their projections weighing you down. It is not easy. It is painful, but it is necessary. Because the mask will never come off if you remain stuck in the roles assigned by others. You must walk away to break the spell. And when you do, you will finally see the truth beneath the masks. And that truth will change everything. Walking away is not just a physical act. it is also an emotional and psychological boundary that demands silence. Silence from you and silence from them. Carl Jung understood silence as a powerful tool in the journey toward self-realization. When you stop responding, stop explaining, and stop justifying yourself, you create a space where true realities emerge. The noise of conflict, manipulation, and emotional chaos often conceals the authentic nature of those around you. Silence strips away the distractions and forces people to confront their own shadows, the parts of themselves they hide even from themselves. When you walk away and choose silence, you remove the fuel that powers toxic dynamics. People, accustomed to control through drama or guilt, find themselves powerless without your reactions. This silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back their true character. It is in this quiet that you witness who they really are, whether they respect your boundaries or try to invade your space, whether they react with anger, sorrow, or indifference. Jung taught that individuation requires facing the shadow, the dark, uncomfortable truths within ourselves and others. Silence allows this shadow to surface. For you, silence is an act of self-respect and protection. For them, it is a test of integrity. Do they try to rebuild bridges with honesty, or do they seek to break you down with manipulation? This moment of silence is a revelation. It reveals who deserves a place in your life and who does not. Walking away, paired with silence, is a radical statement. I value myself enough not to engage with toxicity. Many fear silence because it feels like abandonment or defeat, but in reality, it is a reclaiming of power. Silence forces clarity where confusion once reigned. It breaks patterns of codependency and emotional addiction. It is the first step toward healing wounds, inflicted by relationships built on falsehoods and imbalance. Silence is also a pause for you to reconnect with your inner voice, your intuition, and your needs. It is in this quiet space that you begin to understand your worth beyond others' approval. Jung's wisdom reminds us that true strength lies not in confrontation, but in the calm assertion of boundaries. Walking away with silence is the ultimate act of courage, because it means choosing yourself over the chaos others create. When you embrace this silence, you give yourself the gift of truth. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is often applied to our own hidden fears and desires, but it also extends to those we interact with daily. When you walk away from someone, you give yourself the chance to see their shadow in full light. This shadow consists of the parts of their personality they reject or refuse to acknowledge: anger, jealousy, insecurity, selfishness. When these aspects remain hidden under normal circumstances, you might only see the polished, socially acceptable mask they wear. But once you remove yourself from their influence, the mask slips. Their true nature, unconscious even to them, begins to show through their actions and words in your absence. This is because people react differently when they no longer have control over you, or when their usual methods of manipulation fail. Some respond with attempts to guilt trip or shame you, trying to pull you back into their web of influence. Others lash out with anger or bitterness, revealing a fragile ego desperate to maintain power. Still, some withdraw quietly, exposing their inability to confront conflict or personal responsibility. By walking away, you are essentially holding up a mirror to their shadow, forcing it into the light of awareness. Jung believed that true healing and growth come from acknowledging and integrating the shadow. But this process can only begin when the shadow is seen clearly. When you stay entangled in toxic relationships, you become complicit in the denial of this shadow, both theirs and yours. Distance creates the perspective needed for honest assessment. It allows you to differentiate between who someone pretended to be and who they actually are beneath the facade. This clarity is essential for your own individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic self. It frees you from illusions and unrealistic expectations. It also protects your emotional energy, allowing you to invest in relationships grounded in respect and mutual growth. Jung's insight teaches that recognizing the shadow in others is not about judging or condemning, but about understanding human complexity. When you walk away and observe without attachment, you practice compassion combined with discernment. You learn to accept that some people are not meant to stay in your life, not because they are bad, but because their shadows clash with your light. This realization is a step toward freedom, a liberation from cycles of pain and disappointment. Walking away is a courageous act of seeing clearly, embracing reality, and choosing yourself. Walking away from a relationship or situation that drains you is one of the hardest things to do, yet it holds incredible transformative power. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of detachment, not as indifference but as a conscious act of separating your identity and emotional well-being from the influence of others. When you detach, you stop feeding the dynamic that traps you. You reclaim your space, your time, and your peace. This detachment doesn't mean you lack care or empathy. Instead, it is a way to protect yourself from being consumed by someone else's unresolved issues, projections, or manipulations. By walking away, you shift the balance of power back to yourself. You take control of the narrative instead of allowing it to be written by the fears, needs, or demands of others. Detachment also opens the door to self-reflection. When you are no longer caught in the emotional chaos created by the other person, you can begin to see patterns that were invisible before. You can ask yourself, why did I tolerate this? What parts of me attracted this dynamic? What boundaries did I fail to set? These questions are painful but necessary for healing and growth. Jung taught that individuation, or becoming whole, requires facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationships. Walking away is a key step in this process because it disrupts the status quo and forces both parties to confront reality. The person you walked away from will react, but their reaction reveals more about their inner world than it does about your worth or actions. They may try to pull you back with promises, guilt, anger, or even silence. Each reaction is a reflection of their own unresolved shadows. Observing this without being drawn back in is an exercise in emotional discipline and clarity. It also prevents you from being trapped in a cycle of dependency or codependency. Jung believed that shadows often cling hardest to those closest to us, making detachment difficult but necessary. It's through this separation that both parties gain the space to grow independently. For you, walking away is not a defeat or abandonment. It is an act of self-respect and courage. It is saying, I am worthy of peace and authenticity. This act transforms fear into freedom and uncertainty into opportunity. Walking away lets you reclaim your narrative and begin the process of rebuilding a life where you can thrive, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's a declaration that your well-being is not negotiable, and that you are ready to see who you really are, beyond the influence of others. When you walk away from a person or situation, one of the most revealing psychological phenomena that emerges is what Carl Jung called the mirror effect. This means that the traits, emotions, and behaviors that once seemed to belong only to the other person suddenly reflect back at you with startling clarity. Jung believed that every relationship acts as a mirror, showing us aspects of ourselves that we usually ignore or deny. When you're entangled with someone, their shadow parts, their anger, jealousy, insecurity often feel like attacks. You perceive them as foreign, unwelcome, and threatening. However, once you step back, you start to realize that these projections have roots within your own unconscious. The qualities you judged harshly in others are often the qualities you fear or reject in yourself. Walking away creates the necessary distance to see this clearly. Without the emotional turbulence clouding your vision, you begin to recognize how your own unresolved fears or wounds have contributed to the dynamic. For example, if you felt constantly criticized or controlled, it's worth asking if you have internalized a critical voice or fear of losing control in your own psyche. This is not about blame, but about awareness and healing. The mirror effect also explains why some people try to lure you back into the relationship after you walk away. They fear facing their own shadows alone and rely on your presence to distract or soothe their internal conflicts. When you resist returning, they may intensify their efforts or reveal unexpected sides of themselves, sometimes kinder, sometimes more aggressive. Jung saw this as the shadow's final attempt to avoid integration. For you, recognizing the mirror effect means understanding that healing is an inside job. No external person can change until they face their own unconscious. Your role is to walk your path of self-awareness without getting pulled back into old patterns. The clarity that comes from detachment gives you power to break free from repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to recreate painful scenarios in relationships. This cycle keeps us stuck in emotional limbo, constantly seeking approval or validation from those who reflect our wounds. Jung's wisdom teaches that once you become conscious of these patterns, you can transform them. Walking away is the catalyst for this transformation, the moment when the mirror cracks and you glimpse a truer, more authentic self waiting beyond the illusions. This process is difficult and often lonely, but ultimately liberating. It frees you from the unconscious chains that bind you to toxicity and opens the door to relationships rooted in mutual respect, authenticity, and psychological health. Walking away from a toxic relationship or situation is not just an act of physical departure. It is a profound declaration of personal boundaries, a psychological line drawn in the sand that Jung considered essential for individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Boundaries are the invisible fences that protect your psyche from being overwhelmed, manipulated, or absorbed by others' unresolved issues. When you fail to set these limits, you risk losing your identity in the sea of emotional chaos that often accompanies unhealthy attachments. Jung emphasized that the boundary between the conscious self and the unconscious must be respected to maintain psychological health. When you walk away, you exercise this respect. You say no to being a container for someone else's projections and demands. This act of refusal is the beginning of reclaiming your power. People who are used to having control over you may react with confusion, anger, or guilt-tripping because your boundary threatens their unconscious need for dominance or emotional dependency. They may try to dismantle your resolve by questioning your motives, accusing you of selfishness, or exaggerating their own suffering. But here lies the paradox Jung highlighted. The stronger and clearer your boundary, the more it forces both you and the other person to confront what lies beneath the surface. Your refusal to be manipulated compels them to face their own shadows, those hidden parts of themselves they usually deny or suppress. For you, maintaining boundaries is not about punishment or rejection. It is about self-preservation and respect. Jung warned that losing boundaries leads to what he called psychic infection, where the emotions and conflicts of others invade your inner world, causing confusion, exhaustion, and identity loss. Walking away protects you from this psychic contamination. It allows your psyche to heal, to integrate its fragmented parts, and to emerge stronger and more whole. This is essential for authentic relationships to form, because only when you are whole can you truly connect without losing yourself. The power of boundaries also teaches an important lesson about acceptance. You cannot change others, nor can you carry their burdens. You can only change how you respond and protect your inner world.